coaster. Come along for the ride, yeah. The solar coaster's rolling, it feels so right. Hop on the solar coaster. Come along for the ride.
Aloha, my name is Anna Covert, and this is The Solar Coaster, the wild ride through the solar industry told by the people who are living it every day. In the hot seat with me today is Reverend Kevin Taylor. And while he's not your average solar guy, he comes from a big background of clean energy. So I'm really excited to have him on the show today. Thanks for being here, Kevin.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be with you and all of your many subscribers.
So let's get right into it. Tell me, when did the sun first shine on your solar path?
So the sun first shined on my solar path before I joined Greentown Labs, and that is because one of our sister churches in Boston, Bethel AME Church in Boston, became the first church in the entire AME Church connection, so more than 5,000 churches around the world, to have solar panels installed on their church. Wow. And as it turns out, when I joined Greentown Labs, the person who installed them on the church was the COO of Greentown, Ryan Ding. So it's a small world, but yes, my light on solar was discovered in church.
Wow, well, that's very, timely. I mean, I guess light and church and makes a lot of sense. So what a question before we move on there, I know a lot of churches, you'd think that they'd be an ideal location with how their roof types and they're usually well lit, there's not usually a lot of obstacles around churches, so there's not obstruction. But the funding has been a challenge for a lot of churches. But that kind of surprises me because of all the donations. Why do you think that that's a challenge when more don't have it?
So I think that it's the opportunity and the upfront cost that is required. So I actually looked at it for my church. So I pastor Israel AME Church in Albany, New York. It's the oldest Black church in upstate New York and the stop on the Underground Railroad. I wanted to see whether or not we could do solar on the roof of the church and also in the parking lot, because the parking lot is an area that is obviously not used outside of morning worship and rehearsals. And so could we do like the carports
Absolutely.
and do this? And so when I looked into it, I got a quote. It was like $45,000 up front in order to be able to do it. And that could be financed. But I think it's the initial cost of the obligation that makes it something that is unfortunately cost prohibitive for churches, but it is an excellent source of revenue. And you're right, like those are big, beautiful spaces that can be reclaimed for solar, just as they are doing for residential facilities.
Absolutely. I think that one of the other drawbacks maybe was what I heard was because of the tax credits, right? Since you're nonprofits, you did not qualify for the ITC tax credit of 30%, which is a big reason or motivator to get that price down. Or, a lender, PPA, they're using that to buy down that rate of the utility. Yeah. But now with the ITC kind of coming to a close and other different types of financing available, it'll be interesting to see if someone really steps into that wheelhouse and creates a fund for these types of nonprofits. I think it'd be exciting.
Absolutely. And churches are some of the biggest users of the electric grid. I mean, so when I was pastoring in Brooklyn and National Grid came and said, hey, you can save money by installing better lighting, that created an energy demand lowering that really made a difference in our bill, but obviously helped them as it was pulling on the demand for the church. So I say that to be able to say that there is definite interest, and I think that there are ways in which everybody can be involved. But you're right, the expiration of the tax credits simply means that it becomes more difficult for people to access.
I had a thought just now when we were talking about it. Corporations, they've had a lot. I work with the Boys and Girls Club here in Hawaii, so for instance, and they used to have a lot of corporate donations. But then I think a couple years ago, when the legislation changed, and you weren't really able to take a deduction the same way for a corporation, right? And and I think what would make sense is if a big corporation wanted to write something off, they could actually donate a solar system to someone like a church, and then yeah. And then
we'll welcome that, but yes, that would be the type of thing that that private partnership that would make a difference for a number of organizations. And yes, to the extent that it's a write-off, why not? It would be something to be able to show the community of the level of commitment of that organization, and then to help that institution to be able to thrive. And so, listen, when humankind was created, we were to have dominion over the earth, and so we were given one earth. It is our responsibility to take good care of it, and so it would really be a great partnership.
Yeah, interesting. So, every ride has its highs and lows. What was your biggest thrilling, hands in the eye high from your time in the solar industry?
So the biggest was being able to transform Greentown Labs from a Delaware-based S-Corp into a nonprofit. And so there is that. There was also the time that I had an opportunity to meet Jennifer Granholm, who at the time was the U.S. Secretary of State, but she was also the governor of my home state. And so we got a chance to talk about Michigan when we were there. And I think the biggest hands up moment for me was when I was invited by Northeastern University to deliver the commencement address for the School of Science. And so to stand there among undergraduate, graduate, even PhD candidates to be there and to be able to deliver that address was just, it's still a thrill. I have the picture in my office. Absolutely love it.
Wonderful. So, what about on the other side of that ride are the lows. So I know you shared with me a story before, and I'm not sure if that's the same story you're going to share again, but tell me, what was one of your low points in the industry so far?
So it was the story that we talked about in the covert code, where I was working at Greentown Labs, and unfortunately, because of the stance that I took on the need for incumbents to participate in the clean energy revolution, that actually cost me my job. And so that was a low point, and it was followed by another low point when I was working at a different location for one of the region's largest child development centers, and I simply said that this is that if there was an opportunity for oil and gas to partner with this early childhood center in order to make it so that the children who are in care, and so we're talking about children who are less than 5 years old, could one day grow to be job creators and not just persons who are job ready. If that meant that philanthropy was available, that I think that we should consider it. And unfortunately, the board disagreed, thought it was too political. But absolutely, is it the prerogative of oil and gas to be able to give and to be able to help to make a difference, particularly in those communities that are most impacted by climate change. So there were definitely some lows in this work, but I'm thankful for the highs, and I believe that just like a roller coaster, that what goes down will have to come up again. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what the future holds.
Yeah, I think that's a really a great segue that you mentioned there about underserved communities. I think that's something that you're really passionate about. We shared before, and what are your thoughts on how we can really lower, because solar has always been kind of considered this high end price product, like, oh, it's for rich people kind of thought, right? And we know that's not the case, right? With the low end financing that can happen in leasing, where you're just replacing a growing bill, and if you can afford your electric bill, you can afford solar. But there's really been a bad stigma, and I think especially in some underserved communities, without the education behind it. What are your thoughts on how can we re-educate the population and really help these other areas adopt these practices?
So I think it is. I think it is awareness, and so I think you're absolutely right that there is a need to be able to educate and to be able to share both the benefits of solar, but also where this can have an immediate impact on someone's bank account. So there are programs, and so when I was at Greentown, I learned of a company that was working with individuals to provide their existing electricity through solar and making that available to them as a option instead of going through the local utility company.
Like
And so
community solar, or what are we talking about?
based on solar. So they would be storing the solar and then allowing that solar to be repurposed to homes in that particular neighborhood as a result of this partnership that they had. And so I think it is awareness. I think it's creativity, like that example that I shared. But I think it's also a level of commitment. And so I think we've got to be able to show people the ease with which it is possible to take advantage of solar. And so, in a different context, but a similar vein, we got companies now that are going back to telephone poles and looking to be able to convert those into charging stations. And so, when you're able to see a blighted community be transformed and have now access to things that they didn't otherwise have, i.e., charging stations, you now have a situation where those same communities can appreciate the benefits of clean energy and how they can be involved. And the reality, and we saw this in Houston after the major hurricane, we know that it is the communities of color that are disproportionately impacted by climate change. And so that means that the people who live in those communities have ideas about how to be able to solve the problem. Unfortunately, they don't always have the resources to know how to go about making the change or to creating their own business. And they also may not have the language or even the opportunity to be able to convert those ideas into an actual business plan. And so I think it really is incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we are lifting as we climb, and that as high as solar will take us, that we're not missing the people for whom they've been most impacted by climate change.
Yeah, and I think that it's 100% true. And it's not even just by climate change. It's also what I think about is really just the well-being of the community itself. And when we did, there was a survey a couple years ago that I read, and I can't remember where it was from, but it was really telling. It was about how as we age, the only thing that doesn't really change is our income, right?
Mhm.
And you get fixed retirement or Social Security and those most people don't save for more than that. And if even just one thing happens, like there's an accident of some kind, that could be your whole retirement, and now you're really relying on the Social Security check. And they did a poll of elders, and this was about 3 or 4 years ago. And at the time, they were asking if they had to make a choice, right? Because prices were going up. What would they pick? Would they pick food or medication? And most of them were picking medication, and we have a nutrition problem, right? The elders are not getting enough food, and we know how that goes, right? And then just last year, they did the same test again, and they added to the question there, what would you give up, medication or power, right? Or your phone, basically. And they picked the phone. And so now we have them that tells us something really critical, that power is the most important thing for our livelihoods, right? We're relying on it for air ventilation, for medications, or not medications, but for, food preparation, storage. And it made me feel really sad that, not just, how wide that can go, right?
Mhm.
And I think that those are also some of the benefits of really locking in a cost.
Yeah, absolutely. Locking in the costs, making sure that people are aware of what the options are, and helping them to be able to access those. So I think we can all point to either members of our family or in our community who are more senior and don't necessarily have air conditioning, don't necessarily understand what the power bill might look like, or even say like, don't turn my air conditioning on because I don't want for my light bill to go up. I think that there are also people who, as you said, are making choices between medicine and food, and so food insecurity is a major issue. But listen, solar and other clean energy also create opportunities to be able to replace food deserts, and so there are companies who are right now looking to be able to repurpose urban areas, things like abandoned buildings and other things that have blighted downtowns, to be able to create hydroponically the ability to be able to grow healthy foods. So to the point that you're making also about access to food and the nutrition problem, being able to take clean energy and then to use it to repurpose buildings that otherwise wouldn't have had use, but can now create healthy food options for families. Like those are the types of ways in which lives are being changed as a result of the clean energy revolution. And I just think that it's an opportunity to help to teach. One of the most fascinating things that I have seen from an awareness perspective has been a company called Drink Kicks. And what they do is they actually take food products and then or discarded food products to create sneakers. And so we know that for many in the Black community and other marginalized communities, that sneakers are like a way of life. It is you are a sneakerhead, right? And so to be able to say that you can have a sneaker that looks as good as or better than what Nike is producing, and for it to be produced with biodegradable food products is just amazing, right? And
Wow.
so if that gets kids excited about what clean energy can do, or what being able to recycle can do, if that gets them thinking that, wow, I have an idea, I can do something similar, we are now changing the trajectory of those students' lives, of their families' lives, and most importantly, their communities' lives. So they do begin to work together in tandem if we allow for it to work, if we are willing to do the types of partnerships that you said, if we're willing to have the type of courage to be able to say, yes, I want to invite oil and gas into the conversation. If we have that level of stamina to be able to say, even when it hurts, we're going to still give it a try, I think that we will find that there is definite interest and opportunity.
Yeah, I think that you're right, and so going back to your example of the pole and the charging station. So, is that a state initiative or is it the utility company? Who is making this conversion? It's very
So I
interesting.
think it's one of the startups. One of the Greentown startups was looking to be able to do something like that, to be able to take the utility poles and to create them to be charging stations. It's like it's a brilliant idea, right? Because what else is that being used for, except for to be able to power the lights that come on only at night. But I think it is even in the idea of repurposing is another way of recycling. And so again, and I know we talked about this in the Cobra Code, but the idea that oil and gas is sitting on oil rigs, right, that are in the far-flung areas of the Arctic, right, that are drilling oil, and to know that there are companies that are working to be able to convert those oil rigs and into wind farms, to be able to say that we've made already the investment in the area that you would not be able to otherwise be able to reach, and so I can now use that tower to create an opportunity to do wind power, or because we're already out there and in an area that is getting so much sun that we can now transform that into another solar opportunity. Like, these are the types of repurposing of the existing investment that can really help to be able to transform. And you're right. Once the cost per watt, cost per unit comes down to a place that is comfortable for everyone, then there can be more balance and more harmony. And we don't have to worry about what we saw in Texas, where it's February and it's snow on the ground and people are without heat and power. Like, that doesn't have to be the way we do it. We have left ourselves vulnerable to attack, to terrorist events, all because our system is so antiquated. And so if we are willing to make the investment, to spend the time, to invest the political capital, to get it done, oh, the world is open to us. It really is.
It is. I remember I went to Power Gen in Texas, down there in Dallas. It was one of these big conferences, and the utilities were there, and they were really talking about how we really need all power, right, to make it. We are so power hungry, literally, and this is the kind of power we want to have hunger for, right? To be able to power our lives and create security and create jobs and use AI and all these different things. But we're never going to get there with just one power source. We need all the power sources. But another thing that was really interesting that I learned about Texas was about weather
Hop
in
on the
general, is
soul
that it has no
coaster,
memory.
come along
And they
for
had
the
those deep, what are they
ride.
called? The deep freeze.
Where
Texas deep was what
sunshine
was it called?
meets
Was it called the deep freeze?
stories and brighter
Where, yeah,
futures
and it was like nearly 100 years, I think it has been happening.
We're
And now
sparking
it's
up
speeding up.
ideas
And
and
so we know, and
laughter
to
and
me, that's just
wine.
crazy that we know that history repeats itself with weather. There's
Mhm.
spots on the planet that have this power, and it comes back. And yet, what we hear a lot, and I don't have any Texas solar companies right now, but I have had them in the past. And one of the things we always heard was, "Oh, well, power's so cheap here." "Oh, well, there's what poor weather in Houston or whatever." And no one, it doesn't make any financial sense. Well, the second you have a crisis like this, everything changes. What is it worth to have that peace of mind?
Absolutely. And I think it's everything, because we have to remember who are the people who are without the power when it matters, right? So it can feel like, yep, electricity is cheap, except for when it's your mom at the hospital for a surgery, or it's your dad at the nursing home that doesn't have the power, or it's in the middle of the night and it's your baby being born and no one can get to the hospital. At that point, it begins to make sense. And so all the rest of us are saying is that people are at that place today, every day. And so we don't have to wait for it to get cold to know that there are people who don't have all the resources they need to be successful. We don't have to wait for that. You might want to wait because it becomes more convenient, but in that moment, we are all the same. We are all without power. We are all without the ability to move forward. And so we don't have to be there. And we don't have to allow ourselves to be there, because you're right. It does take all. It's not going to be a nuclear issue. It's not going to be fossil fuel. Fracking is not going to be the thing that is going to change it entirely. It's not going to be all solar. It's not going to be all wind. There are going to be a combination of things that are going to make it so that we can become energy independent. And so if we want for there to be the world in which we live, for us to remain nationally strong, it's in our own national security interests in order for us to be able to move this forward. And listen, this is not the first time that America has ever had to make difficult choices to be able to advance the republic. We did it in World War One. We did it again in World War II. I don't want for there to be a World War III, but in the same way that America came together to move us out of the Depression, that we moved together to be able to create the infrastructure that was needed to be able to win World War II, that we can decide ourselves that we're going to do this. And so, look, Kennedy said that, that he wanted to get us to the moon. And while it didn't happen before he passed, it did happen by the end of that decade in the same way that he said that it would. We can do this. And because honestly, if not us, then who? And if not now, then when?
That's it. Well, it says, like, you have to have the will, right? Because we are the quantum observers. We have to have the will to be able, whatever we put our minds to, we can achieve if we do it together. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I agree. So, are you driving? Do you have solar in your house?
So we don't, but for the same reason is the initial upfront investment. And so we did look at it. It would require us to take out a tree in the yard. We had them come and take a look at it, but it's the same issue. It is the access to capital.
Yeah. I think one thing that people may not realize who are listening to this is that while the federal tax credit has stepped down or is being terminated for residential by the end of this year, there's been an extension for those who are using PPAs or leases.
Mm.
And I got to tell you, I think leases have gotten a bad name, I don't know about your feelings, Kevin, but
Mhm.
in the past, because of, I had a whole section in my book that I never got published, that part of the book,
Mhm.
but about, overcoming some of the myth behind a lease, right? And there were some really shady leases out there, pun
Mhm.
intended, and there still are shady leases. But there's also huge opportunity for a homeowner to just, it's fully transferable. You're now just trading your utility bill, which is ever growing, with a new payment to a company, and you have no risk because in 20 years, just basically what the lease is, you're not responsible for the equipment, right? Like, they will have to come fix it. And I think that's a big burden that people don't realize, of like, oh, wow, like, I can just immediately today, no money out of pocket, get a lease and be secured for 20 years.
Mhm. No,
Yeah.
and so I agree, but I think it goes back to the same issues that we discussed a moment ago. It's about what is the awareness campaign and how are you building it authentically and not for it to feel like a sales pitch. So like I can remember being in Home Depot and the guy walking up to me and saying like, "Hey, have you ever interested in solar?" And so we're talking and like he's writing my name down and doing all these other things, and it's like, "Sir, I'm trying to get the things I need to get in here to get." And so, so it feels more sales pitchy than it feels like, "Hey, here's an opportunity for us to be able to work together." But that's where organizations like churches, like other faith-based groups, are able to, you have a captive audience, but with a trusted partner to be able to tell the story. It doesn't have to be a sales pitch. It can be just an opportunity to educate. And so I
Yeah,
think,
how,
I
yeah,
think
how do you see how do you see how do you see that working out? Like, what are your thoughts? Like, I think this is a great idea. So, if you're a solar company out there and you want to tap in to what you're talking about, what's the next step? You contact the congregation. You ask to do a what do you think is
You do a presentation. You offer to talk to the pastor or the faith leader on site to be able to say, hey, at the end of service, could we come and could we just for 15 minutes have a conversation with members? And maybe the answer to that question is no, but maybe there is the opportunity to, hey, after service we're going to sponsor cookies and punch, or we're going to sponsor coffee and tea, and we're just going to sit, and yet maybe not everybody is going to stick around afterwards, but like for those who will, you got coffee, you got a dessert, and you learned about this thing that is available to you. So
like it?
or you learned about the other investment vehicles that are out there in order to be able to make this happen. I think it has to be a deliberate campaign, a deliberate effort that again is not rooted in my metrics say I've got to get 5 sales out of this conversation, so I'm gonna strong arm people to beat that metric, but instead to be able to say that, all right, if I can get 25 people into a room and to understand, and maybe, just maybe, not all of them are going to sign up, but if I get 1 or 2, that's beautiful. And if nothing more, those 25 tell 25 more. Now 50 people have gotten the information and feel better about solar, because honestly, anything is going to be passed better by word of mouth, right? So the best form of advertisement is word of mouth. It's not the billboard. It's not the paid advertising on Google. It is word of mouth. And so if someone's excited about a movie and they say, oh, I watched the movie and it was wonderful, like it makes you want to be able to do it. And so if I can get people excited about solar, or excited about the opportunity that exists, or excited, as you said, about the lease as a form of security, then as I share that excitement with others, it makes me more inclined to be able to come back. But we have we have made it such an incentive to, I've got to convert this many people on this day in order for me to be able to protect my job or to meet my sales quota or whatever that is, that we miss out on opportunities for organic growth and organic interest simply because we took the time to say something to someone.
Yeah, we call those solar bros in our industry. And the solar bros have really given solar a bad name. And, it's from the door knocking. It's from this encroachment, I think. And part of that is, the Home Depot experience you've had as well, right? That you're being kind of, you weren't asking, you didn't have no intention of bringing this towards you. They're pushing it on you. And that's a totally different feeling than, and I think that you're right, that's given people a really bad taste for solar, I think, and in a lot of communities as well, where there has been these solar bros, and they were deceptive, bottom line. They overcharged people, they took advantage of people, they were permit poaching. I mean, just, everything that you could think. And that is, I think, one opportunity of what's going to happen moving forward, where there's not going to be this opportunity, because the tax credit's being stopped, for people to gouge the consumer. Because, there's been a lot of that happening, so there's like a convergence happening of utility bills going up. We're seeing some markets 30% year over year. That is outrageous. I mean, I live in Hawaii, so we're at the top over here, and I have lots of solar, as you can see, but I mean, that to be in someone in Florida and in Texas and these places, I don't think it's gone up 30% in Texas, but it's definitely going up. But you know what is going up every year for you?
No, so I think so. Certainly, our utility costs continue to increase. So our electric bill is higher. So we live in New England, so we have propane, and we also have gas for some of our appliances. And listen, no gas for heating, and like that bill for propane continues to grow. I mean, to the point where we've had to turn the temperature down in the house in order to be able to make up for the difference in price. And so, fortunately, we are able to absorb the cost, and so we'll be fine. But that's not the reality for every person, and that's not the way in which every household budget is able to work. And so, to the point that you were making earlier about seniors, if I've got to make a choice between the medicine that might prolong my life and the groceries that might in the short term fill me up, I'm going to make a choice. Now that choice becomes harder to make if my utility costs have also increased by 30%, on top of my eggs costing more, on top of my bread costing more. And so, like, those are the downstream impacts that these types of things have. But now no one is going to that same homeowner necessarily, or that same person living in the apartment, and saying, hey, here are access to fresher vegetables here that are bought at a lower price. Here is an option for you to be able to get your electricity from a different source, and will
Like
enable you
community
to help bring
solar or
your
something like
cost down.
that.
Like,
Yeah.
and that's where we're, but like, look, we see a commercial for new medicines all the time, right? But
Oh,
they're not the same commercials for, here's how I can lower your bill.
that's true. I thought we need almost like a PR scheme like that got milk,
Right.
like where
Yeah.
just where people are realizing that, it's not it's there are options out there. And I think there are more options in some places than others. I mean, there are some utilities that are, really like a monopoly. I mean, utilities are a monopoly, the only true monopoly. I mean, I think very few people realize that they don't have a choice. It's built into the paperwork, right? The bill of your house, that you cannot, like, when in some places, like, well, and we were talking about Texas. In Texas, you can throw a shoe and hit a utility company,
Hmm. Right.
literally, right? Here in Hawaii, there's only one utility company,
Mhm.
right? And you can't choose. Like, you could choose, what cable provider you want. You can choose what cell phone company you want. You can, but no, you can't choose water. You cannot choose your power in a lot of
Mhm.
places. And I think that that's something that also needs to be looked at. I mean, like, in New England there, I mean, there's people who are trying to get off the grid and they can't even get off the grid without a penalty.
No, and you're absolutely right. And listen, all the things that we've described as easy solutions to these types of problems, all of them are going to come with consequence. And some of that consequence is going to be negative PR. It's going to be, intimidation. Unfortunately, it's going to be people, making it more difficult. The question has to become: are we willing to risk the political capital, to risk the relationship capital, to risk the goodwill that has been generated in order to bring about the change that we need? Nothing that we have ever had has come from without there being hard work and effort in creating it, right? So no right has ever been received, Frederick Douglass said, except through by insisting upon, making sure that the oppressor gave it. And so the same thing is going to be true about the political action that will be required. Someone has to be able to get to an elected official and say, "Listen, this is so important to me," and that person has to be willing to risk the possibility of not being reelected or missing out on campaign donations in order to be able to have a principled stand. And listen, there are a lot of principled stands to take on a number of things. But if this is something that you want, to be done, we've got to be willing to put the resources behind it in order to make it. It's supposed to be representative government, and so you have been you are representing my ideas, not just the ideas of the biggest special interest. And so these are all things that are at play, and it's the reason why it has taken as long as it has in order to get to this point. But as you've mentioned, there is a dam breaking. There is a shift happening where people are at least open to the conversation. You've created an entire podcast around the idea of solar, and so things are changing, and we need more people like you who are going to be advocates in order for it to change.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I think, for me, one of the greatest feelings I've ever had was when I started selling solar. Because before, when I started off, I was just doing advertising. I owned an advertising agency, of course, and I just fell into solar because I had someone who I was doing marketing for who sold solar, right? And then I, got into with SunPower and started getting more dealers. But it's really such an interesting industry, and you really don't know about it until you actually sit with someone and you're right there at their house. And I'll never forget, Kevin, there was this one family and they were out there in, Wahiwa, and their bill is like $600 a month, and it's a hardworking family. They have two kids, and
Mhm.
they're there, and I could feel how nervous they were when I was there, right? And like waiting to be told that they couldn't afford it, kind of thing, right? And we get to the end, and they pass their financing, and the woman is crying, from joy that they were going to be able to get this security. And I remember driving home, and I never had that feeling before in my whole life. The feeling of like, wow, this is that everyone wins. The solar company I'm representing wins. This family is going to win. The manufacturer wins. The world wins. And it's very rare to be able to be a part of something like that.
But that feeling is the feeling that so many families have, that so many families crave. Like Again, and I'm not trying to oversimplify that family situation, but like if you cut their bill in half, I don't know how much the bill
They
was.
did. We cut it in half. Yeah.
But $3,600 versus $7,200 in a year is a big difference in a two income or a household trying to send kids to school, right? Like you've introduced revenue opportunities or different spending options if they invested that money into those children's 529 plans so that they didn't have to graduate with college debt. And again, not to oversimplify, don't want to be in that situation, not trying to be in their living room, but what I'm saying is that we're talking about financial freedom. And so
Yes.
in the same way that, it's important for us to talk about the need to be able to invest, the need to be able to take advantage of your company's match in your 401k or all of the other vehicle investment vehicles, do an IRA with some of your tax return, all of those things that we talk about. As much as it's important to talk about that, we've got to also talk about this thing too, because so many people are unsure of why you need to have life insurance and how can that be an investment for. So many people are unsure of why you should have a 529 plan versus just thinking that you're going to take out a loan. And there are also that same level of lack of understanding for people of how solar can help you to reduce your overall cost footprint.
Absolutely, and really transform your life. I mean, I have a campaign called the Shoulda Woulda Card, and and what we do is let's say we met, and you didn't. I know what you're spending per month, and I know what I could save you if you went solar. But you decide, it's not the right time for you, whatever the reason is. It's not you're not sold right, about the solar. And so now I start a campaign where I wait and I start a clock. So if you would have saved, let's say your bill is $500 and it would have been 300 with solar. Now I wait till the next milestone. So when you would have saved $750, I send it a card with tires. And it says like, those could have been a new, shoulda, coulda, still can save with solar. It's a pair of tires. And then $1,000 is a new, whatever it is, right? And then we start going up $500 at a time and then $1,000 at a time. And I stop at $5,000. And I say to them, like, this is your last chance. Because I think there's something about the tangibility.
Mhm.
We know that a lot of people, they don't save for the future because of the reward mechanism, right? Temporal discounting. That I'd much rather have the money now and go have dinner with my spouse than to save it for when I'm retired, which is so far in the distance. And that's why no one saves money, right? But I think that there's something about that tangibility. Like if I told you, like, Kevin, if I gave you a $200 gift card every single month, would that change your life? The answer is it would.
Mhm.
But thinking of like this 20-year savings is like, I think just the wrong way, right, to sell it. So I'm hoping that we just started the campaign for a bunch of clients and just the tangibility of like the touching of paper, I think also is going to be really, hopefully transformative.
Yeah, so I agree, and I would expect that you should see a lot of conversions from those, particularly the closer you get to the $5,000 mark. But for the same reason, by being able to talk of it in terms that matter to them, right? So in a community like Texas where they're driving, most people have pickup trucks. The cost of tires are quite expensive, right? And so like that is a real tangible thing. And and maybe in some other community where you're looking to be able to send the kids to college, like you could have saved the first semester at the community college.
Braces, I mean, even
Right.
like,
Right.
yeah,
Yes, absolutely.
okay,
Yeah,
really.
all of those things that matter, and I know that we try to make it sound um uh so absorbent or so high and mighty, but to bring it down to the levels that people are able to understand and relate to, like the tires, as you said, I just think that it becomes more tangible, more accessible, and more, as we would say in education, more sticky. Something that's going.
Like a bag of groceries. That's our first one we sent us $250. It's like, that's a big bag of groceries you could have gone to Costco with and bought.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and all of those things. I mean, look, even a Costco membership for multiple years paid for just by you choosing to do it this way. And so I think that investment is what it's going to take to make it happen.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here today, Kevin. How can people get a hold of you?
So I would love it if people would go to my website. It's REVKTTAYLOR.com. You can learn about the many ways that you can interact with me, whether that's through coaching or through keynote speaking. I'm happy to join your podcast. But you can also learn more about my book, A Charge to Keep, and it's available right there on the website. Thank you so much for having me today. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks so much for being here. And for all my listeners, make sure to check out Reverend Kevin Taylor's other podcast with me on the Covert Code. It has been a rave success. We're already at 14,000 views, and it's just been online for like less than a week even. So not to be missed. We'll link it into this podcast as well. And please join me next week as I interview another industry expert to help you succeed the highs and lows of the thrilling roller coaster ride that we love called the solar coaster. I'll see you in the pixels. Aloha.
Hop on the solar coaster, come along for the ride, yeah. Where sunshine meets stories and bright futures collide.